Alright, welcome back to Comic History, episode 97. This is more highlights from Marvel Comics from late 04 to 07. These are stuff I missed. One thing I forgot to mention is that we actually had this period of time, we had the return of the Moon Knight ongoing series, which, of course, this is actually was the first ongoing series Moon Knight that came while I was reading comics. It was initially written by a novelist by the name of Charlie Hudson, who did the first half book, and then Mike Bensick over the book, which I have read this on my YouTube channel already, and it lasted for a good 3 years. Yeah. And I'll talk more about this in the next episode, talk about from 08 to about 2010. Let's see. We also had Ghost Rider. Yes, Ghost Rider had an ongoing series, which I believe, I think it was Danny Way who was the writer of this book. Because, of course, they decided to bring back, Johnny Blaze as a character for an ongoing series in 2006. And, like in the case of Moon Knight, this lasted for a good 35 issues. And I believe Daniel Way, he was the original writer of the book. And I believe he was. Yeah, and then, of course, the book was taken over by, of all people, Jason. Yeah, it was Danny Way originally. And then it was Jason Aaron took over a little bit after that. But also Moon Knight himself, for his particular book, he put out an annual. His first and to date only ever annual. Ghost Rider, on the other hand, you probably think, did that volume put out an annual? It did. About 2 annuals. Yep. There's one other book discussed here. And that being a book known as the book known as Thunderbolts. Yes. They were still publishing at this point in time. I think they had just been, I believe they have been, let's see. I think the book had just come back. Yes, I believe the book had just come back. Just like a year prior. As New Thunderbolts. Yes. Yeah, we actually, we had a few different writers. Mostly we still have Fabian Nicieza, still was the writer of this book. Yeah, believe it or not, Fabian Nicieza was the majority writer for this book. Because he'd taken over from Kurt Busiek. Let's see. Yeah, he was the writer did he do New Thunderbolts per se? He did. He did New Thunderbolts. But by the time I got in the comics, I think that was still being published at that point. I believe it was. I wasn't really paying attention to Thunderbolts, but I do remember he was the writer, and then, of course, they had the Civil War 1 tie-in, which, of course, had Thunderbolts become affiliated with the U.S. government. And then they got an army for the Guardian Protocol story arc. And then the season left. And he got replaced by Warren Ellis for about a year. And then he got replaced once again by Christos Gage. Yes, Thunderbolts this period of time also, let's see, the original lineup basically. The lineup basically at that point, which was, I believe it was most of the original lineup at that point, which was Atlas, Joystick, Zemo, Songbird. Also, Zemo and Songbird were sort of in a relationship that went nowhere. I believe Moonstone just came out of coma at that period of time, I think. Though by the end of the storyline, which involved apparently the death of the Grand Master, like, Atlas was in a coma until he waked up in Last Defenders. I'll get more to that. Joystick went to prison because, of course, she was turned a criminal for reasons. And Songbird did whatever. And, of course, here's the weird thing. Moonstone stayed with the team. Everyone else all went their separate ways. And, of course, the group became a government agency ran by Norman Osborn. Yes. But one of the biggest things that happened in the aftermath of Civil War 1, which was in 2007, was the start of the 50 State Initiative, which, of course, and we also have launched to 2 new Avengers titles. Those 2 being Mighty Avengers by Brian Michael Bendis, who left in 2008, issue 20. Yeah, he was doing this book. As a matter of fact, I've actually did a whole review of that whole run. It was at the time, I wasn't really interested in it. Later on, I did read it. It was really good. I enjoyed that book. I remember the lineup. I think it was Miss Marvel, Wonder Man, Wasp, Iron Man, who was not deleted. The subject is on the roster. It was Iron Man, it was a Black Widow, Sentry, and Ares. There was even like a joke when they brought in the irredeemable Ant-Man to become part of the roster. Yeah. But it didn't go anywhere per se. Not really. There was also Avengers Initiative, which the whole thing with this one was like, oh, let's introduce these brand new characters. Yes, these brand spanking new characters when the book started. And yeah, and this is kind of interesting when it comes to, well, it was like the whole thing of this book. Now, Dan Slott wrote this whole thing. Him and Chris Cage wrote this whole series. The book changed direction later on, but they had this one character named Michael Von Patrick, whose initials were MVP, who got killed in the opening issue, and then for some weird reason, they decided to clone him as Scarlet Spiders, which, of course, by the end of, like, a certain point, well, they pretty much all got killed. Well, basically 2 of them did. The other one, I'm not sure what they did. So, basically, you had Trauma, which, of course, he has done virtually nothing. Yeah. The 50 State Initiative. Which, this is interesting. Of course, they launched a Patsy Walker Hellcat book, which, for some reason, like, oh, we have this team in Alaska, and it went nowhere. Like, Arizona had the Desert Stars, which is basically some Western heroes. We had Battalion, which debuted issue 19 of the book. We also had The Order. Yeah, they were short-lived ongoing. And I did read, apparently, they were going to book originally Champions, but there was a legal dispute with a different company, despite the fact no one published the characters back in the 70s. So call them The Order, written by Matt Fraction, and this book introduced a character known as, believe it or not, Ezekiel Stane, the son of Obadiah Stane, who later became a recurring villain, Iron Man. Yeah, and there was also, let's see, there was the Woman Warriors, which they're based in Delaware. Yes, some people were introduced, like, heck, there was even, like, a ForceWorks team that was part of the 50 States Initiative. Yeah, they somehow brought the group back. And Like, a lot of these groups, they just introduced them, and a lot of them, they did nothing with these groups at all. And it was kind of the thing where, like, oh, we just introduced all these brand new teams and did nothing. I mean, can you think anything noteworthy a lot of these groups did? It's like, I've heard also years later it's referred to as militarism, per se. Of course, this initiative was later discontinued in 2010, briefly brought back in 2011, and then never mentioned ever again, per se. Yeah. But, let's see, was anything else? At the end of Messiah Complex and X-Men, Xavier died, and then it's later led to a story called Divided We Stand, which, of course, well, I might talk more about that another time. Spider-Man, of course, aside from the One More Day stuff, there was some noteworthy stuff, like he took on the Thunderbolts. Aside from that, I can't think of a lot that happened. Yeah, and aside from the fact that by 07, Marvel decided to have Amazing Spider-Man the first and only time in its history published 3 times a month. And occasionally it's been reduced down to twice a month, and still occasionally it was been twice a month, but not always. So, the people who graduated from the first arc happened by issue 12 was Cloud9, Hardball, Thor Girl, she was the character debuted in, I believe it was New Warriors, Commando, Trauma, Triathlon, who goes by 3D Man now, and Ultra Girl. Yeah. And it's like, oh, we have all these new characters, and I kind of felt as though that this book was interesting, but I kind of felt as though a lot of the characters who appeared in this book were pretty much waste of time. It's like a lot of these characters don't do anything. No, seriously, they do not do anything at all. And plus, also, we have the initiative Banner, which, like, some books had it for like 1 or 2 issues. And you're probably thinking, okay, let's talk about a lot of these characters. What about Thor, the God of Thunder? His book did make a return by JMS. And the book was really good. It was awesome. It's based in Braxton, introduced characters. We wake up. I love those first 12 issues that he did. He actually... I initially thought that the last issue he did for the book was issue 600. But I found out from reading these issues that, well, how should I put this? That JMS himself, well, he would actually lead with issue 603, which I think is published in like 09, I think it was. Yeah, I'll talk more about that later on. But you're probably thinking, who the heck wrote Iron Man? Because a lot of books we do have a pretty good idea who wrote them. Iron Man, yes, it was started by, this volume was started by Warren Ellis, per se. Yes, it was. And then you probably think, okay, so Ellis did the first 6 issues of the book, which became the basis of stuff for the MCU. But you're probably thinking, like, who took over the book? Right after you left, it was the Coniffs. Yeah, they were the initial writers of this book. And they would write the book into issue 28, which came out in 2008. Yeah, I'll talk more about that at some other point. Also, the Eternals came back as a miniseries by a lot of people, Neil Gaiman, which started a brief ongoing afterwards. Trying to think, was anything else? Oh, one thing also, that the final issue was delayed of Civil War 1. Yeah. And some might be thinking, Nick, why didn't you bring up the Ultiverse? Well, the Ultiverse was doing fine before 07. Yeah, it was actually pretty good. Nothing bad for that universe, that period of time. But next time, however, I'll be discussing some more interesting stuff because 08 to 2010 are very interesting years for Marvel Comics. Yeah. And there's a weird thing that happened in 09. I didn't know about the recently that happened. But, like, this person made changes to Marvel Comics for the bad. And I should point out, though, that wasn't seen for several years. Wasn't seen until 2013, mind you. But I'll talk about that next time. When I talk about highlights from 2008 to 2010. Yes, very good years, in my opinion, for Marvel Comics. Yeah, pretty much if you think about it, from like 05, basically from like 05 to 07, pretty interesting years. Not a lot, there's like some bad per se, but not a lot of bad. I would say the only kind of negatives for this time period, this book I did include the 04, but the only thing big because that was when I started getting the comics at that point. But in 05, I would say, we just think House of M was a negative thing? Not really, no. It basically did lead a lot of really good storytelling afterwards. I would say the first negative that happened in this period of time was Civil War 1. And then afterwards, it was One More Day. Aside from these two negatives, this was not a bad period of time for Marvel Comics. No. And some might be thinking, would I do this for DC? Not really per se, because basically I got fully deep into DC Comics in 2010. And I was mostly at that point just deep into Batman comics. I was not highly into the other comics per se. But there won't be a lot to discuss because there's a lot of Batman stuff. I do for Marvel because I've been a long-time Marvel fan. I haven't read anything recently in the last few months because I'm busy with all their stuff. I'm working on like Tokusatsu and anime and all that other stuff, okay? But yeah, that is pretty much it for today's video. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, to notifications. Next up is going to be Hero Class, and then afterwards it'll be, well, not comic history, which is going to be quite interesting to discuss that period of time, okay? Thanks, you. Bye.